Welcome to a new episode of Free to Thrive in Work and Life. I am your host, Pascale Landriault, an international career and quality of life coach, helping clients from around the world to create fulfilling careers and lives by igniting their talents and their passions, building courage and confidence, and breaking free from the barriers that are keeping them from thriving. My guest today is really shaping a new paradigm in business. One of putting pleasure first and still getting great results. Christina Morassi is really helping women to be women in business instead of playing by the masculine rules. Mm-hmm. She's from California, and we were both engaging in pleasure.
Yes, we were.
When we met on the dance floor of Five Rhythms Dance here in Ubud Valley. Mm-hmm. So welcome, Christine. I'm really happy that you're here in this place that we call La Papan, close to Ubud. And so, Christina, you've created the what you call the feminine operating system. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, I would love to.
Yeah.
So first of all, thank you for having me. It's been so great to be able to cross paths in Bali and to see where we connect and have such similar passions. And so thank you for the work that you're doing in the world and like helping all of us with our transformation and our purposes. So thank you. Okay, so for me, the feminine operating system. So the way I would describe that is that, you know, we've all had this patriarchal operating system, like automatically installed into our hard drives, like whether we wanted to or not, we didn't have a say in the matter. And, you know, the patriarchal operating system doesn't serve men either, but at least it's based on masculine values. But for women, it doesn't serve us at all. It's kind of like we're running the totally wrong, like, system for ourselves, where it's like running, you know, Windows on a Mac computer. Like it works, but not very well. Or trying to put diesel gasoline, you know, in a gasoline car, again, doesn't really work. So for us women, we don't really realize how much we're playing the game that we can't win, you know, that we're not built like men. Mm-hmm. We have different skill sets. We have different, you know, gifts. And so we need to understand, first of all, what they are. Like most of us don't even know what our feminine values and skill sets are, but then we need to know how to use them and how to create success with them in our work and our business and our purpose. So for me, that's the feminine operating system, and there's a real difference there, and we can go into more depth around that of what it is exactly, but that's what I'm talking about when I say feminine operating system.
Okay. And, you know, I know you've had quite an interesting journey all around that. Could you perhaps share with us, like, how you stepped into like your feminine operating system?
That's a great question, because I created quite a bit of success as a successful business coach and kind of grew my business fast, was reaching women around the world and doing big 3-day live events and doing online launches, and had the whole successful machine of a coaching business, and had a lot of great things happen where myself and my community, you know, raised $25,000 to sponsor a village in Africa for 5 years and build a school. So there was a lot that was good about that. But it reached a point where I was working nonstop. I was on the verge of burnout. I didn't have a personal life of any kind. And it just felt like I was wearing myself down. And I knew that something needed to change. And so for about, you know, maybe 9 months, I say I was trying to turn the ship slowly. Like I knew it needed to change, but I had this like machine of a successful coaching business. And
so after, were you operating under the masculine operating system? So you were a woman operating under
it. Now, to be honest, I was a healer before I crossed into being a business coach. So I did retain some of my femininity, maybe more than most, but still I found myself defaulting into man mode, as I say, of like just working nonstop, trying to play the game the way I was taught versus like trusting my own inner intuition. There was just a lot. It was like that hustle and grind kind of mentality that is not feminine at all, right? So after trying to turn the ship slowly for 9 months, and you know, I was trying little different things, like a different program and a different kind of launching, but it wasn't really working. And so I sat down and I deeply committed to my spiritual practice and to the feminine. And so I thought, all right, Christina, you need to do something more drastic. And so I decided to pull the plug on the business. And it was a pretty successful business still, even at the time. So I just pulled the plug. I went into the unknown. I devoted myself even deeper to my spirituality and to my devotion to the feminine, and just listened for what was next. And in that journey, really, I had always been embracing and exploring like being in my body and dance and sensuality. So that was always a piece for me, but I went in deeper after pulling the plug on the business. And what I really saw,
just a little, when you pull the plug, like, what did you exactly do?
Great question. Yeah. Okay. So at the time I was doing live events, I had high-end masterminds, I was doing online launches. So I was in the middle of an online launch when I got this knowing from inside my body that I had to do something drastic. So I canceled the launch. I didn't sign a contract for my next live event. I had a high-end mastermind that I had maybe 2 or 3 months left on. So I just let that run out. I canceled everything else, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to go into the unknown, and I'm going to have some like a handful of private clients and sort of coast and be in the mystery and see what's next. Does that answer the question?
Yes. And how long ago was that?
5 years ago. So it's been a long, interesting journey. So I was in the unknown for a lot longer than I thought I would be. It ended up being a year and a half. But along the way, I dove in deeper to my sensuality. And what I started to see is that we as women have so much power in our body and even in our sensuality and our sexual center as well. And I saw that we weren't using that in business at all. Now, of course, I'm not talking about like when women are dressing up and sort of sleeping their way to the top is a horrible example. But, you know, that's the one we've been taught in the patriarchy of how a woman uses her power. And that's not what I'm talking about at all. But really, there's this place of like, we women have a particular kind of power, but we don't know how to use it because it looks different than the power that's based on the patriarchy that's out there, right? So along the way, I saw what a feminine power looked like, and I got very inspired about, you know, having all these friends who had their successful 7-figure businesses, but were on the verge of burnout and adrenal fatigue and just really falling to pieces. And I thought, we're doing this wrong. It's not sustainable. We need to learn about our feminine power, and we need to learn how to use it. And then we need to like go out and kind of fulfill on our purposes in a way that feels good and is sustaining.
So how is that transformed now into like what you're doing today? Like, how did you step into that?
Well, mine has been an interesting journey because I have been dismantled and dismantled and dismantled some more in this 5-year journey. So not everyone needs to go through this process, but my own personal journey is that, you know, you don't just jump from the patriarchal operating system right into the feminine. You know, there's like an unplugging process that has had to happen. And I think I've been going through that.
Like almost unconditioning yourself.
Yes, totally. Totally. And really too, I was kind of ahead of the game, you know, where in the beginning, no one was really talking about the feminine. Of course, now we're in a day and an age where it's out there everywhere. There's like a real upswell and a rising around feminine power with the Me Too movement and things happening in politics. So it's very exciting, but I was ahead of that curve. So I kind of got very, very dismantled in that process. But it has gotten me to this place where I am now learning how to work with my feminine power and my natural design, the way I am built. It's kind of like when we use our feminine operating system, the machinery sort of like hums and sings along and sort of is just in harmony. Whereas when we run the patriarchal operating system in our feminine beings and our bodies, it kind of screeches and grinds and sort of
like changing speeds and just going like this all the time.
Exactly. Like you can do it, but it's not very smooth and beautiful, you know, and really I think that's why so many women are so exhausted and overwhelmed and busy and just running on empty and fumes is because we're not using the right fuel.
Plus when you're acting not on your natural talents or your natural instincts, that's the best way to burn out because it takes twice the energy.
Exactly. So I'm now learning how to work in my natural design. So I've been in Bali for 8 months. You know, I'm learning how to set up my day that, you know, kind of sets me up for success, but also sets me up for my natural design, you know, where I'm meditating and having my own pleasure practices and getting connected to my body and making sure there's downtime and rest and really focusing on my creativity. And I also like to say I focus focus on my turn on, which is that place, when we sort of feel like feel like $1,000,000, we all have a sense of what that turn on means. It's like flipping a switch of some kind when a woman is in her delight and her radiance, right? So I talk about focusing on my turn on rather than my to-do list. And so what's happening
that's
was,
nice.
it's good, right? So what's happening is like now it's starting to feel better and things are happening more naturally where I'm attracting things to me. I'm not having to hustle and grind and make things happen. So I'm learning how to work with my natural design and it feels so much better.
What about this desire? I've read some of the things you've written, and you talk about this desire that we're not really kind of showing, and that it's a really important element in order for us to kind of be in our power and our natural power. How does that come into the picture?
Desire is one of my favorite topics. So it's a real cornerstone to the feminine operating system. So again, the feminine operating system is basically just using our natural feminine values. And when we're talking about masculine and feminine, let me make this clear too. I'm not talking about men and women. We're talking about the archetypes of the masculine and feminine. We could just as easily be talking about yin and yang, or estrogen and testosterone, or right brain and left brain. It's basically the two different forms of energy that kind of create the engine of the universe, if you will, like a positive pole and a negative pole. Like we need polarity in order to create the arc of power, right? So let's make sure that's clear. That we're talking about male and female. So for me, in the using my feminine values, there's a lot to this. So the feminine is very much about leaning back and letting things come to her. She's about feeling good and delighting in her body and her human form. She's about using desire to kind of create things in her life. She's about turning things on and real enjoyment. There's a beingness about the feminine archetype versus the masculine archetype is sort of all about a doing and a structure and a protecting and a providing and being of service, right? So just to give a little hint of the difference. So back to your question, desire is a cornerstone of our feminine power. And so the way that I describe desire is that desire is a spark that rises up from our soul and sends us in the direction of a nutrient that we need. Now, I love that because what we're saying is that basically desire, if it comes from our soul, then our desires are holy. It's not something frivolous. It's not something selfish. It's a desire for our soul to have more life, right?
So it's almost like a child, like just seeing an ice cream cone and just expressing like his desire or her desire for the ice cream cone.
And it's
like,
quite pure, right?
Yeah.
So what I found is that most of us as women are not in touch with our desires. We've shut down what I call like our desire channel. And we've done that for various reasons. It might be, number one, some of us might feel like, well, if I'm never going to get it, why would I waste time desiring it, right? Or some of us might feel like our desires are selfish, or some of us might judge our desires. And so we squash them before they can ever be a spark that rises up. And to me, that's a real problem because our desire can actually be a GPS for us of some kind and guide us to like what's right and in alignment with our soul versus like coming from the head and like, this is what needs to happen and be all plan and strategy, which
it's
again
almost,
is patriarchy.
I'm like listening to you talking, it's almost like intuition, but with a wave in it,
Yes, there is something. So in an ideal world as women, we're spending time in the mystery, which that's a whole other part of the feminine operating system that we don't embrace in the patriarchy, right? Because we're also go, go, go and hustle and needing to make things happen. But ideally we sit and listen into the mystery because from there we can hear the spark rise up from our soul and then guide us towards something that we want. And we're listening for the deepest, truest desire. There's always sort of the more surface level desires of like, I want a cookie, right? Which is okay too. Like that is a desire. But the way you can look at that is it's generally kind of a surface level desire. And if you went a little bit deeper, there's a deeper desire underneath that. So if you ever want a cookie and you want to excavate it, you can be like, well, what's the deeper desire underneath that? And it's probably something like, I need some nourishment, or I want someone to hold me, or I'd like some intimacy of some kind, right? So there's usually a deeper desire. So when we're talking about desire, we're talking about the deeper one that we're listening to. But that can guide us. in our lives, in our relationships, and in our business. And so if we're kind of kinking the hose of our desire channel, as I call it, then we're missing out on this incredible wisdom and power of our feminine that could really sort of make our lives a lot better. So all of us as women need to be tuning into our desires more.
Yeah, my next question is really in line with what you just said, because I was really wondering, like, what happens when the feminine is well represented and is just even represented, more, like either for a woman in her own business, what happens then, or just at large, collectively, when the feminine is better represented. But
well, it's a great question because, again, our world is based on dualities, right? So there's a masculine and there's a feminine, and we need both to feel whole. So also, let me say too, that every human being has an inner masculine and an inner feminine. As women, we also have an inner masculine, and men have an inner feminine, right? So basically, we all want to learn how to embrace both sides, right? So two, I will say, even though I'm talking about the feminine operating system, it's never about leaving the masculine out. But really what needs to happen is most of us have suppressed our feminine. So we need some help to open that up. And then we need some help to so we need to heal our inner feminine. But then we also need to heal the masculine. And the ideal is that they come together in a divine union, right? So what happens when the feminine is more represented is we all become more whole. We become more whole in our businesses, and the world becomes more whole. And I want to say, when you bring your feminine into your work and your business more, it's going to work more. Like your life's going to work more, and you're going to be using the right fuel. So you're going to feel better in your body. You're going to feel more enjoyment. Your relationships are going to be happier. Your health is going to be better. You're going to, your clients and the people that you're working with are going to be happier because you're more
fulfilled.
Exactly. To me, it's sort of like an ultimate fruition place when we're using everything in its exalted state. So I think it's very important for all of us to learn more about our feminine power and then learn how to use it.
Do you actually work with men and their feminine side, or?
I have in the past, not necessarily, more so when I was a business coach, but it's there for sure. Like, as I've been doing this whole series of posts on the feminine operating system on Facebook, I've been writing about different aspects of it and sharing photos. A lot of men are commenting on almost every post. So they're seeing pieces of like things that they're missing as well, because if the men are only in their masculine, they're also not whole. Now, they're a little better off because they're in a world based on masculine values. So at least they're in the predominant culture, but they're still missing out on the feminine that can actually give them more power, give them more enjoyment and more sustainability.
So Christina, for you on your journey, like, what was the thing that was either most challenging, or what did you learn the most, either about yourself or just about the feminine in general, going through your journey?
Well,
and I know there's probably a lot of things we could probably go on for.
Do we have days here? Yes. So for me, the hardest one was to let go of the push. I call it the patriarchal push. And we know this place where it's like we have to get things done and we have to make it happen and we have to hustle. And it's hardwired into our brain and our neurons, right? Like, this is no joke to switch into the feminine operating system. We're working with synapses. It's biological on some level, right? So to let go of thinking that I need to push, that I need to get things done, that I need to be productive has been the hardest thing to let go of. But the problem is...
But it hasn't stopped you from actually putting actions into place, or has it?
Oh, that's a good question.
What's the balance there?
That gets tricky to answer. So I wouldn't say it stopped me, but I've had to shift the way that I work. So it's meant that I have not been as productive in such a stage of producing things, for sure, because I almost had to switch things out. So we could think of like a farmer when they're tilling the land, right? In an ideal world, they grow things, and then there's a moment where they let the land rest. Like, I don't know if you've noticed with the rice fields, like where I'm in the rice fields as well, but when I first moved in, there was no rice. They had totally other different crops going on. And then all of a sudden, now I'm surrounded by rice fields, and I was fascinated by this. So I asked the farmers, and what they told me is that if they just always planted rice, the land would get tired and not be able to produce. So they do rice for a while, and then they do other crops that help out the land in a particular way, and then they go back to the rice. So that's an analogy for what it was like for me in business, where I am on a bit of a sabbatical here while I'm in Bali, because I had to kind of remove myself, just sort of upgrade, and then begin again. So it hasn't stopped me, but it has stopped me from just overproducing and learning how to listen within, listen into the mystery, as I talked about earlier, listen for my sparks of desire, listen to my intuition and my creativity, make sure there's time to get into my body where, as women, our power lives here, and be in this place of allowing and releasing rather than producing and making things happen. So that's been the most challenging, because even, I'm still landing this body of work around the feminine operating system, right? Like someday there'll be a book, there'll be an app, there's going to be so many pieces, but I feel like I'm learning how to live it first. Like I have to walk my talk, right? So in that process, I keep feeling that impulse of like, I should be further along. I should have more things done, so that's still in my brain, even though I've been at this for 5 years to switch over. Right. So I'm still in that place of like, no, come back home. I have to celebrate little successes. I have to focus on the fact that I'm living in a way that feels more sustainable and more enjoyable. I have to look at success in a different way. And in that process, I am feeding this new way of operating, but it has been a challenge.
Yeah. And, we're not used to sometimes you need to sit for a while. And then when it's actually time for you to start moving and going into action, the actual time that it takes you to either get a result is like much shorter. So the total elapsed time is often the same.
It's
because
true.
the whole time you're pushing and spinning your wheels and time is elapsing, but because you're not aligned or listening or all of the things you described. Yeah, that's very interesting.
That's a great point. Right when I got to Bali, I challenged myself to do an hour or two of nothingness. Literally laying on my bed, staring at a white wall, doing nothing. Now, granted, I have the luxury of doing that. I don't have kids. I'm in Bali. I can give myself that gift. But I found that I needed it. I needed that white space to really be able to listen to my own inner voice. And so that was one of the pieces I wrote about on Facebook. And I challenged everyone to say, I know I have the luxury of being able to do this right now, but all of you can set a timer for 5 minutes and try nothingness and just see what that's like. So I just challenged that.
Meditation, because sometimes people will even look at meditation from a perspective of, I need to stop my thinking, and it's almost you're in meditation, production mode.
Exactly. There's an agenda there. So just an invitation to everyone watching, if you want to try it, just in a time of 5 minutes. That's it. And just sit your ass down and see if you can do nothing, and research it, explore it, and see what you find out.
And I imagine you more and more comfortable actually just doing nothing. And to me, that's not a waste of time.
No,
it's not a waste of time.
It's almost harder than producing.
So, Christina, is there like one last message or one last word of wisdom or something that you could say to the women and men that might be watching this?
Well, I want to support everyone to just start paying attention to the difference between the world based on a patriarchal operating system, based on masculine values, versus like the feminine wisdom that is just very different. And so what that can look like in life is trying the 5 minutes of nothingness, and listening into the great mystery and just listening. Like the feminine is from the yin part of the yin yang cycle, right? So she's naturally dark. She is part of the mystery. She's the cage. She's the place, of receiving something, right? And being receptive and in a place of surrender. So just little things like 5 minutes, of nothingness sort of brings in more of that dark mystery, that the natural feminine power. and for women and men too, to really spend some time in your body more, like even throughout your workday, to just have a dance break. And even if you're at a job and in a cubicle, lots of other people around, there's a lot you can do when you go into a bathroom stall. Like I do this all the time when I'm traveling. I'll go into an airport stall and just have some moments to get into my body before I get on a plane, right? But I have to really not push that, you don't want to push, but I have to really place that in my life and my schedule to make sure that I'm getting more into my body.
We actually had a dance break before starting.
We did, because I said to Pascale, like, how can we have fun? Because it's so easy. We could have been, I asked for us to be standing up as well, because I knew that would get us into our bodies more and more from our feminine. Because when we sit down, often what happens is we disconnect from the body. We're a culture that lives from the neck up in our heads. And as women, our center of gravity is not up here. For men, their center of gravity is like, and center of power is up in their heads. For women, it's down in our hips. So if we're living purely from our head, we are missing out on our greatest wisdom and our greatest power. So I asked for us to be standing. We did some movement. I said, how can this be fun? Because I'm like, I can't talk about the feminine and be up in my head. That's not going to work, right?
So you might see all in the other shows, you might see us standing up too now. So Christina might have set a precedent here.
Right. And even things like, for those of you, if you have an important call, or if you have a speaking engagement of some kind, or you're doing an interview like this, get into your bodies beforehand. Do a fun dance break. Put on your favorite songs. Like, it's going to change the way that you speak, in the way that in your presence. So people will feel you more, and you will be more effective in your work. So that's an important piece. Let's see. I just want to give like some feminine operating system hacks, which is very masculine. I totally get, but it's sort of fun. It's like I don't mind speaking.
How about staying another month in Bali? Maybe.
Yes, I know, to like let go of those pieces. Yeah. So, and even if there's a place for when you're creating something, especially if it's a creative something, to see if you can allow it to come through you instead of the push. How can you let it release from inside you? And I know that's easier said than done, but just to sort of, I want to plant the seed so you can start thinking about these pieces.
It's like a process. It's an ongoing process. There's no need to make it an end, to be like, I'm going to be perfectly in this thing.
Right. It takes time. Yeah. It definitely takes time. I will also say for women that, to me, using clothing is a great way to get into our feminine power. And a lot of people could call that vain or materialistic or all sorts of things. But the feminine is about adornment. It's part of her power. There's a real beauty to that. So for the women, I invite you to wear clothes that are a little bit more feminine and a little bit dressier and maybe even a little bit more sensual, and see what happens for you in your work and in your life and in your relationships even. Because I see so many women who want to be approachable or appropriate, and so they really tamper themselves down, and it's actually a place of our power. Now, again, I'm not talking about dressing slutty, but I'm not talking about sort of push. I'm not talking about sexual. I'm talking about sensual, right? And so there's a place where when you put an outfit on where you feel like $1 million bucks,
puts your body shape in value. Yeah. So whatever that shape is, actually.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, if you feel good, there is a power and a radiance to that is effective in work. And it's not something to tone down. And I know it gets complicated because many women will be like, well, but I might attract unwanted attention. And that is a reality, certainly, especially in this day and age of the Me Too movement. But at the same time, the more that you're comfortable with that form of your feminine radiance and your power, I have personally found that the more people outside of me are comfortable with it as well. And the only way you're going to get comfortable with it is if you kind of keep taking steps towards it and keep practicing and growing into it, right?
And not pushing yourself to be more sensual than you actually feel, because then you'll be incongruent and it'll show, and you'll attract all sorts of things.
Yeah, no, we're just talking about little baby steps. Like I did not used to dress up at all, but I noticed that actually it was in ecstatic dance, because I've been doing ecstatic dance, which is where Pascale and I met in a dance class in Ubud. I've been doing it for 17 years. And in the beginning, I found that I would see people 2 or 3 times a week on a dance floor. And then I would meet them outside of the dance class, and they would have no idea who I was. And they saw me 2 or 3 times a week. And I was like, something isn't right here. What's going on? And I'm like, I must be invisible in some way. I'm not shining my light. And so I started to work myself and challenge baby steps. You know, I was wearing like probably black stretch pants and a white tank top at the time. So then I started to wear a tank top with color. And then I started to wear a skirt, you know, so I just took little baby steps. And now I'm actually known for like really pushing the edge of like wearing very feminine clothes and sexy and sensual and even edgy. But for me, that's part of my brand. I want to make this okay for women to explore this side
plus
of themselves.
it's also part of your personality, you know,
but it didn't used to be.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Like for those women, anyone watching being like, well, that's not who I am. I'm going to beg to differ, because it doesn't mean it looks like my version for sure, but every woman has that place where her feminine power, where the turn on is there, their radiance is there. I used to talk about helping women flip their switch. And there's this place where, so let me actually, can I just give an example of like talking about what I do, sort of not turned on and then turned on, so people can see the difference, because I want to leave you with just like concrete examples. You know, this can sound so theoretical, but I want you to understand like how real and like effective in like a life skill this is, and then maybe that's where we can finish up. Okay, so I'm gonna get out of my body. Just
sit down.
I know I should sit down, but that's all right. With the camera, we'd have to adjust it. So I'm just gonna get up in my head, and I'm gonna be kind of stiff. You know, like we sort of often, like most humans do. And I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about how, hi, my name is Christina Morassi, and I am the creator of the Feminine Operating System. And I like to help women kind of be in their natural feminine design to create success in the world. Okay, so not horrible, right? I mean, I'm sure we've seen many an elevator pitch delivered that way, right? Okay, so now let me get down on my body. Just a little bit like that. Okay, now that means I am connecting with my hips, and I am connecting with my sensual center as well. For me, this is where our power is. I mean, not for me, for all women, but this is something I'm comfortable with, and maybe not everyone is, but still, we want to get out of the head and down into the body and into our hips. So, hi. My name is Christina Morassi, and I'm the creator of the Feminine Operating System, and I am so passionate about helping to unleash women into their raw feminine power, and then to learn how to use it to create the success that they're here to create, and to sort of like really go out and lead their missions and their movements and their purpose, and sort of make the world a better place. Different?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So could you think? Leave us a comment. Let us know if you could feel the difference. But I'm guessing you felt something different. Now, obviously, it's an exercise, and it may not be perfect, but at the same time, we're missing out on like being sort of stiff human versus like being in our feminine power, and it's going to make us more effective to create the world that we want to create here. And that's what really turns me on, and I want to help turn everyone else on so we can create a better world.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for listening.
Yes,
and thank you so much for you know, bringing the feminine like out even more and more, and hopefully, you know, it'll take the place that will make it a good balance, you know, that will, you know, harmony and balance between the masculine and the feminine. That's actually what we're aiming for, right?
The whole world will benefit by all of us in our feminine powers. Like I've even seen, I saw a TED Talk by men, which was a little strange to me, talking about, they didn't say feminine operating system, but it was very close. And they were talking about how the feminine values are needed in leadership and on the world stage. And so the men are even starting to talk about it. So
feminine
the
leadership
whole world will benefit.
Is really taking place, and a lot of men are bringing it forward. Feminine
they're celebrating us. So women, we need you in your power. So please, whatever you do, like learn about, you know, your own value, your own natural design, your own power, and see how that can make your life even more vibrant and amazing.
Well, thank you, Christina.
Thank you. I'll give you a hug. Thanks for having me, and thank you for the work that you're doing in the world.
And thank you for listening. See you on the next episode. Thank you.
Take care.